so about 5 years ago, we were faced with a new challenge called neural machine translation. It was a challenge because it was a new technology in some ways. And when we have new technologies as teachers, that demands new expertise from us and from our learners. But it was particularly challenging this time around because the technology was one that was seen as rather opaque. So a lot has been said about the opacity of neural machine translation, but I think Jen Burrell's reflections on opacity in general are quite useful. And she talks about intentional opacity, where maybe a software producer produces something inscrutable, proprietary software that you can't really look inside. That's not the case with us. Machine translation in general is characterized by the availability of open source software sharing, etc., in the machine translation community. But in our community of translation teachers and learners, we can sometimes suffer from technical illiteracy, which causes opacity as well. In other words, we just don't understand this particular technology. Again, this is a problem that we can overcome. We've done this before. Technologies keep changing, and translators and translator trainers are actually very good at integrating new technologies. So this is something we can overcome. What's even more difficult, though, is what she calls machine learning inherent opacity, the kind of difficulty you face because the technology itself is complex and it operates at such a scale that it is difficult to grasp. So this is a tricky technology that we're facing now. It also brings with it some challenges to do with sustainability. So, for example, we know by now that the technologies that we use to do free online machine translation come at a cost to the environment. So a huge amount of energy is used up in kind of online translation, a huge amount of processing power. There's also the problem of sustainability of the profession. So, for example, once a university president hears, oh, machine translation is supposed to be working at human parity now, he or she wonders, why are we teaching courses in translation then? We also face the problem where new entrants might be reluctant to get into a profession where they think machines are going to dominate. From a teaching point of view, and a technological point of view in general, there's also the challenge that comes with machine translation being a technology that's used not just by professional translators, but also by the general public, by citizens in society, language learners, etc. And each of these groups, each of these constituencies has different expectations of machine translation and maybe also different needs when it comes to learning about the technology. And then we have all the learning contexts in which we might address machine translation. So, for example, we have university programs with full modules, secondary schools, maybe even primary schools will encounter machine translation when students are learning a second language. And of course, workplaces, whether they're professional translating workplaces or other workplaces, will also have learning needs that have to do with machine translation. And we've lots of different modes like online and face-to-face, synchronous and asynchronous, that we need to be able to cope with in our teaching. And we need to be able to help people integrate both technical and non-technical information. So there is a lot that would be helpful for certain people to know about how the technology works. And there's also a lot that would be helpful for people to know about what impact the current use of the technology can have on certain practices, such as language learning, for example. In this group that we're in, we are also very committed to the idea that learning should be situated, it should be as realistic as possible, that it has to integrate the artifacts that a professional would work with if we're training translators, for example. And this poses certain challenges as well. So how do you create the environment in which people will learn what they need to learn? And of course, if I haven't already touched upon it, there is a bigger picture. Current machine translation is a nice instantiation of machine learning, and machine learning and all of its applications have huge consequences for society. And we're familiar, or a lot of people are familiar with these consequences when it comes to the manipulation of news, or the use of personal data from social media platforms, for example. But they mightn't think of the issues that arise when one unthinkingly uses online machine translation. You might not be aware of the hidden biases, for example. And of course, there is potential for machine translation to disrupt language learning, or but there's also the potential for it to support language learning and to support multilingual institutions, multilingual societies, polyglot individuals. So there's a lot of good potential that we would like people to know about.